where we serve you delightful, slightly intense, but definitely worthwhile conversations. A podcast focused on bringing people together by drinking, listening, and conversing. So grab your favorite drink and let's see what's on today's menu. All right, people, welcome to Peeps Creek, the cafe. You know, here at the cafe, we always have a conversation centered around a drink. And today I moved back to one of my old cups. I used to have this some time ago. But anyhow, it is a penicillin is what I'm drinking on. That is a whiskey-based drink courtesy of the little Bartesian machine over there. And as always, so that I can stay hydrated and balance the liquor in my liver, I always have H2O, boom, 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 right there in my trusty cup. All right, and today I am joined in the cafe for the first time, allegedly a listener of the podcast, but it is Humberto. Say hello, Humberto.
Hello, everybody.
All right. Are you excited to be here for the first time?
Yeah, a little nervous, but excited.
Okay. And are you excited even more to be in the DC area for a little while?
Yeah, I love it here.
Okay. And why you?
It's a little nerve-wracking. It's my first time being on camera like this.
Why you sound like you getting interviewed for ABC News or?
I don't know. It sounds like I am. Am I not?
Oy, bendito. All right. So we are on an episode. We're going to do an episode. This episode, don't know the number because I don't know when it's going to come out. But this episode is actually going to be called I Ain't Spanish. And I'll tell you why we kind of named that here. All right. So first and foremost, Humberto, you want to tell the people where you're from?
Sure. Yes. So I'm born and raised. Well, actually, sorry. Let me start over. I was born in Mexico, but I was raised in Oregon, and specifically live in Portland, Oregon now. And I've been living there for 10 years. So I would say that I'm an Oregonian, even though I was born somewhere else.
So I was going to say organo, but what is it?
Oregonian.
Oregonian? That's what y'all call yourself for real?
That's what they call us, I guess.
Well, you should just focus on being called a Portlandian.
Sure. Yeah.
And tell me, do you watch the show Portlandia?
Recently, I've watched a few more episodes, but I cannot say that I'm an avid fan of the show.
No, you know I love that show.
Yeah, you do.
Or you know I almost watch it almost every day. And
it's got some funny parts, but it's not for me. I can see why people would like it that aren't from Portland specifically.
Okay. Anyhow. All right, so let's talk about this particular episode. So this episode was born on a Sunday. Actually, this last Sunday, we were here in the DC area doing a late B-Day celebration for me, my friend, who y'all have heard on the podcast several times, Jay, wanted to take me out for brunch. So we all went to brunch. So shout out to Jay for brunch. Great little place. What was the name of it? Do you remember?
Something with an A. A
la Coffee and More. Yeah, in DC. Very, very good restaurant. They kept complaining about the 90 minutes. Well, I guess they wasn't really complaining because we were there longer than 90 minutes.
They kept reminding us that it was 90 minutes.
Yeah, 90 minutes. And it was unlimited brunch. But let me tell you how it's not really unlimited. It's not unlimited food, people. So you get breakfast. No, you get a starter. You get a regular meal. What is that called? It's like a 3-course meal.
3-course meal.
So you get a starter, then you get the main dish, and then you get dessert. What did you think about the food?
The food was good. Portions could be bigger, but the food was good. But I like the unlimited drinks because I actually like mimosas, and y'all didn't like mimosas, but the mimosas for me, I could keep drinking.
And these were the type where they actually bring you the champagne, place it on the table, and
then
I like mix it yourself. And you want to tell the people how many bottles you partook in on that particular day?
I will not disclose how many bottles I had, but let's just say I made my $44 unlimited brunch worth it.
All right. So here's how this started. I don't even know. I think we were walking down the street or we were at another bar after brunch and I said something. Do you remember?
I don't remember the exact moment where this idea of having the conversation came up, but I remember it happened a few times prior to that time when you were like, we should talk about this on the podcast.
Okay, then tell the folks what you remember about the prior.
I remember just you saying something around like oh, you Spanish people do this or like that or something
No,
like that.
I did not say
It wasn't
you
that?
Spanish people. I said I called you Spanish.
Oh,
And
maybe
I
you said something like you're Spanish.
Yeah,
So,
and I said, why don't you like this? You're Spanish.
oh, that sounds about right.
Yes. So retract
like
that for these people start sending me letters saying that I'm saying you people.
I just remember it being a pointed question.
And then you got pretty animated in your response. And so what is your response to that? And why did that kind of automatically turn something on for you?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely got animated because it made me feel some type of way being called Spanish. Because I'm not Spanish. Spanish people are people who are from Spain. And I know oftentimes people in the U.S. refer to Latinos or people who speak Spanish as Spanish. And that has never landed with me because I don't identify as Spanish. And actually, Spaniards are the colonizers of a lot of Latin American, I think most Latin American countries. So that history to me was like, I was triggered by it a little bit. So that's why I responded like that.
And with folks in your family, do they kind of share the same sentiment that you share to your knowledge? Or is this based upon like you've been educated on this concept or you just always felt that way, that you didn't want to be called Spanish?
Oh, no, I did not always feel that way. I definitely don't think that other folks in my immediate family, at least that I've had conversations with, wouldn't probably respond to being called Spanish in that way. And I think the way that I responded was definitely based on my formal education, like high school, college, and sort of the classes that I took that exposed me to like that history, or understanding that history in a more critical way. So that's why I responded that way.
And what about for folks, just for edification and education purposes? I get what you're saying, right? And I think I immediately got what you're saying. But you do speak Spanish, and I know that may sound stupid, right? So there are going to be people who may view that as an oxymoron, that you are so gung-ho about saying, I'm not Spanish, but yet you're speaking the language. How do you respond to that? Or what would be your reaction?
Yeah. So my immediate reaction would be, you don't call people by the language that they speak. So that would be first. And then I would probably try to educate someone as to like why that's not accurate, or like what, I guess I would probably like ask like what they mean by that. And then I would probably educate or like try to raise some information.
Okay. But what about the term Hispanic? Does that give you the same like, ugh?
Not the same but definitely an ugh.
Okay. So why not the same but definitely a ugh?
I don't think it's not an inaccurate term, but it's not a term that I like.
Okay, why?
Because to me, and I know that this is just like a very different experience that probably other Latinos have, or people who are from Latin American countries or Spanish-speaking countries. So first, let me break down what that term really means. That Hispanic is referencing people who speak English or who speak Spanish and who live in the U.S. I think specifically people who are from Spanish-speaking countries. I should be more specific about that. But to me, I don't really relate to that word. Just in my experience, I feel like I probably at some point growing up, I did use that term, and it was a very common word to be identifying as in, like, I don't know, back in the day when I was little. But now, after being again, educated and just kind of learning about like what it means for me to claim the term Latino, and really embracing like my Mexican identity and my culture and my indigenous identity, I really became like more inclined to use the word Latino as an identifier for myself. And also let me clarify that term for me changes in like where I use it. If that makes sense.
Okay, so let me make sure I accurately can parrot what I hear you say. The word Spanish creates a for you because it refers to, or it symbols or signifies that that's the language that individuals speak. So for instance, when you go to some African countries and they might speak Swahili, you don't refer to those folks as Swahilian, right? Because that's the language that they speak. So for you, what I hear you say is that term place you in a box of based upon you speaking a certain language, but that language also came from a group of individuals who you refer to as a colonizer.
Yeah, like people that harmed others in my country.
And then the term Hispanic for you is a less of a but it's still a. So I guess it's not a but it's like a.
Yeah, just because personally I don't use it to identify.
All right.
As that.
And so the term, you also said that for you is a term that has been used in the United States to refer to individuals who come from speaking countries. And I think the first time that it was actually used on a census was in around 1976, right?
Yeah.
Because there were a group of individuals who were wanted to capture kind of the same concept of what you were, that they were, because I think before they just called them Spanish. And they wanted to capture that you needed to have a term that would capture people from Latin speaking countries. Mm-hmm. And that's more than just Spain. That includes Mexico. That includes Puerto Rico, even though Puerto Rico is a
American colony.
Well, we don't call it that. We call it a
territory.
Territory. And then there's like Venezuela and all these other places, right? That people migrate here and then they speak Spanish. All right. And then it wasn't until I think 2000, I'm looking at some documentation or some research that we did. It wasn't until 2000 that they introduced the term Latino. Now, is that on the census? Because you filled out the census.
Yeah, the census has, I just hit the mic, has Hispanic or
That's
Latino.
National origin.
Yeah, so the census has 6 main racial categories, and then for each category whatever category you check, there's a subsection to check, are you Hispanic or Latino, Latina? And then so the census tracks both. All right.
Now, can you theoretically, to your recollection, can you theoretically select both Hispanic or Latino, or is it one or the other?
It's one. It's like one option.
So it's one option altogether.
Yeah.
So
you know how it says like Asian or Pacific Islander?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah. So in essence, they're not really tracking. I guess they put that on there not for the purposes of trying to track those individuals who identify as Hispanic versus Latino, but I guess to give this comfortability so that people who speak Spanish but don't identify as Hispanic can still select.
Right.
That. Now, what do you put as your racial selection? Because you got to do one and then the other.
Well, I know what you're trying to pick at this, and I'll be very honest that it could be problematic to some. As I mentioned earlier, I am indigenous from Oaxaca, Mexico. My people are Mixteco, and that's also my family's native tongue. And I, again, through education and just like my own racialization in the U.S., I have now progressed through several categories that I checked. Not several, actually mainly just white. But then I was like, why am I checking white? And then, I mentioned there's 6, and Hispanic Latino is not a race, but it's also really hard I wouldn't speak for anybody, but I'll speak for myself that it's hard for me to find one of those 6 racial categories with which I identify or feel like I fit in. And so just acknowledging my own indigenous culture and my becoming comfortable and like feeling really empowered within my identity, I started recently, I think the last census really, I started picking American Indian. And it's American Indian or Alaskan Native is particularly the category that I chose.
Okay, now, and why do you feel that that's an appropriate category? Because you're technically not indigenous to the area. And we had this conversation.
Yeah.
And when we were in Albuquerque, I introduced you to one of my friends who is a Native American. We kind of began that conversation. Do you, having had that conversation in Albuquerque, do you still feel like you fit more in that category? Why not select any of them?
Well, you have to choose one of them.
Why?
Well, I mean, unless I don't fill out the census, and then I'm not being like considered in the census, which is really important because that's how resources get allocated. That's how people track data of like where communities live. So if I don't fill out the census, I know that it's not maybe not the most accurate information for the context of the U.S., but looking at the name American Indian, I'm technically part of an American Indian category because that's a very broad category. It's not. It does. Like, I don't know, like, I'm sure people have different opinions, but like Mexico is North America.
It says,
is it North America? Yeah, it is North America. I know right? Yeah, it is.
But it says American Indian. So you're taking it as the Americas, because technically that would also include South America.
I do, and I know that it's very well. First of all, let me also say, like, I wasn't asking your friend to speak on all Native people, and I don't think I don't think that that's like that's not what I'm doing. Again, I'm just speaking from my experience. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm doing, but she didn't necessarily like disagree with me picking the box. She was just like open to understanding, and at least I didn't hear any verbal disagreement. She's probably been like, oh, that beep beep, but I'm sure that she probably did see a little bit of to where I was coming. But anyways, that conversation itself I thought was a really good conversation. And then wait, what was the question?
I don't know, because you're over there drinking that tequila sunrise or whatever the hell that is. Okay, but I want to stay on that for a moment. Then we're going to move back to some of the other topics. I know you didn't think I was going to bring this up, but you know.
Oh, I knew you was coming.
We at the bar, baby. That's the way we roll. Okay, so foundationally, the same reason that you kind of have that visceral reaction to being placed in as Spanish, right? And sort of kind of Hispanic, because you more so identify as Latino versus the other two categories. But I guess when I had the conversation with you, my issue with it is that I do have family members who are Native, right? Mm-hmm. But I also, through education, particularly when I was in law school, I learned a lot about it, because I actually did the Indian law certificate as well at UNM, or did most of the classes, but I didn't finish the certificate. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that a lot of individuals, including Alaska Natives, which is why they had to put that category on there, that they actually had to go through the Supreme Court over and over and over
to get that
to be recognized. And there are a lot of individuals, particularly like in Albuquerque, right, who are in Pueblos, and it took them years of fighting to be recognized by the federal government that they are indigenous to the United States of America. And the census is only about the United States of America, not the Americas, because Mexico is technically its own country. So that's why, for me, it kind of caused me to have that conversation with you. But I also understand that for you, you resonate more with the concept of that it is signifying that you are indigenous, and being white is not indigenous because you don't identify as being white. And that's fundamentally a flaw in our system, right? Because it doesn't necessarily capture. Now, I also get your point about, well, if you don't pick something on a race category, that maybe you won't be counted. But just don't fill it out online. Fill it out on paper.
That's how I filled it out.
and only select Hispanic, Latino.
You can't.
No, yes, you can. It doesn't stop you from filling out the rest of that form if you do it by paper. Isn't there other? I thought they added an other on the race category this last time.
You might be right. I would think I should probably revisit. Again, those racial categories, as you mentioned, like are not accurate. They lump a bunch of people with very different experiences. Like not all, like even just like Asian and Pacific Islander. Those are two very different, like really huge groups being lumped into one. So these boxes are all problematic. They're, years of advocacy from a lot of these communities to get those groups recognized, and still white people are in charge trying to determine what is actually like, what we need to measure and all that stuff. So these aren't perfect, and they're inherently the problem. I'm not.
All right. So according to the census.gov, we have the category of white. We have the category of black or African American, and even in that category, there's problems with that because there are individuals who don't identify as African American. There's African Americans who don't identify as black, and this, here, there, and whatever. And then there's American Indian and Alaska Native, which is identified as a person having origins in any of the black. Oh, excuse me, I'm looking at black. A person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America. So technically, you're right.
I knew I was right.
Including Central America, and who maintains tribal affiliation or community attachment. This category includes people who indicate the race as American Indian, Alaska Native, or report entries such as Navajo Nation, Blackfeet Tribe, Mayan, Aztec, Native Village of Barrow, and Abiate, and Nubia. I don't know. Traditional government or non-Eskimo community. So there you go.
Wow.
But
cheers to that.
Cheers to that. But still, I disagree with it.
But again, they're not. They're not intended to provide a solution.
Okay, wait, because this is going back to your thing about resources, because they don't count. I honestly don't think I think they identify them as American Indian or Alaskan Indian, and that's how they really categorize them. All these other aspects of it, I really don't think it's how they allocate the funds. But go ahead. What are you about to say?
Well, I was just going to say that, I didn't study tribal law. I've been learning a lot about tribal law through my current work, but I did do a lot of indigenous studies in college, and that's really where I found my pride in my indigenous identity. And that's through people who were my professors who were native. One professor who was native in particular, who told me, like, why aren't you bringing this up at the forefront of your work? And so for me, like, that acknowledgement from a Native American person who was very like grounded in urban indigenous communities and organizing and preservation of culture and celebration, like it ignited something in me that I was like, yeah, why am I trying to like not make that a part of my identity or not celebrate that as a part of my identity? And just also for a clarification, one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier that I don't feel comfortable choosing white, even though, Spanish people colonized Latin America and Mexico in particular, like I don't identify as that because my family is like 99% Mixteco. So I don't, like, my history, my culture, like all of it has not ever been surrounded around whiteness until I moved to the US and was introduced to that idea. Actually, I can't.
You do live in Portland. You do know that as white is white.
Yeah, and also let me take that back. Whiteness is still in Mexico, so it's just what I wasn't introduced to it yet until I was in the U.S.
Okay. Well, it seemed like we were able to get some kind of clarity on our varying positions.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. I mean, I still stand by what I said, particularly because I do.
I forgot what I was going to say.
No. I do think it's important that people recognize that their
complexities.
Well, no. I do think it's important that people recognize the difficulties that Native Americans, particularly Native Americans that are indigenous to the United States. encounter every day, right? Because they fight every day with water rights. They fight every day with the ability to be sovereign in their decision making with respect to the individuals that they have who live within their territory. They fight every day to be able to still instill their traditions into the everyday societal expectations that we have. And so I think as a person who was pretty heavily involved with individuals in the community in Albuquerque, particularly, that's what I did. We had to do, it's called clinic. Every law student had to go through clinic where you had to pick something, and in that process you did actual legal work as a law student to learn the aspect. And I purposely chose the Indian law clinic because I wanted to understand the uniqueness of the complexities that they particularly deal with. But to your point about complexities of individuals and complexities with identity, it's the same thing applies as well from my perspective. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like earlier when I was talking about my work that I did in my undergrad, there's a lot of urban indigenous community members that aren't enrolled in a tribe, and like the whole registration thing is also a whole problem in the U.S. in particular. To my knowledge, at least, I'm not sure. I'm sure like other countries have those similar dynamics. But a lot of the urban indigenous folks, like even though they're not like recognized as tribal members, they still check that box in. Well, I'm assuming that they would if they're like participating in Indian education programs, or participating in their own ways of celebrating their culture. So I feel like that's just kind of important information that I kind of have to say. It's not just about like federally recognized tribes. It's also about like urban indigenous community members that aren't necessarily affiliated with the tribe, but it still are indigenous to
Wait, what are
North
you talking
America.
about?
Just people who aren't tribally affiliated, who aren't registered and aren't recognized by the federal government as being tribal people, but are still indigenous people, and they might not be living in a tribe reservation or whatever, but like they're still indigenous people, and just because they're not registered doesn't mean that they're not indigenous people.
Well, no, I never said that.
No, but I just wanted to say that like there's not just like tribal people that are filling out this or tribal affiliated people that are filling out the census.
Oh, you still on the census thing? We just went through it.
Oh, did we close it? Okay.
We agreed that it's available for individuals who come from indigenous.
I just wanted to
aspects.
make that other clear.
Okay, you over here going.
But I also do want to say, like, I did hear you say something about like it's really hard for Native people in the U.S., but really Native people all over the world are struggling with in different ways in their countries. So I just want to say that because like people are fighting everywhere for like protecting water, protecting the Amazon forest. In my own community, in my own country, like indigenous people there aren't respected as much as like, or don't have the same rights as like lighter skinned Latinos.
Oh my God. Okay.
I just felt like it was important to say that.
It is very important to say, but you also are saying it as if I am indicating that I have no knowledge that there are other individuals who are fighting for the rights. I'm only speaking about the topic that you and I spoke about because you never brought any of this up.
No, I was responding to one of the things you said.
The hell?
Chill. We're at a bar, okay?
Bro, exactly, because this is where the rubber hit the road. You over here bringing up arguments that I didn't bring up.
I was responding to one of your points. We can ask the listeners.
But it's a valid point that you bring, and I appreciate it. And I'm glad that you speak for these communities.
I don't speak for all
exactly.
of them. Not claiming to.
All right. So the other thing is that then that kind of raised us to, or got us to start talking about the Latinx and then the Latine.
Latine.
How do you pronounce it?
Latinx.
So there's two. There's
I see. Sorry.
Latinx, and then there's the Latine.
Right. So the development of like the gender neutral
correct
terms to Latino, Latina. So there's Latino, Latina. Then there was Latinx or Latinx, and then now there's people using Latine.
Latine is how you
Yeah.
pronounce it. Okay.
Yeah.
And where do you fall in that?
Well, it's Latine, to my knowledge, has been most recently being used. So it's a pretty, I wouldn't say like new, but it's a pretty much like a fresher take on this gender neutral language on that particular term, and actually just like the Spanish language in general. So to me, having it being new, like I haven't embraced that term yet. So as I've been using lately, like it's been Latinx as a term that I identify.
All right. Why?
Latino or Latinx.
Why Latino or Latinx?
Well, I use Latino because I identify as a man. I'm a cis man, so I use Latino. The O is appropriate to me, but when I refer to the communities that I'm like, when I'm making a general statement, I use Latinx because that's, to me, like that's been what I've been using for the last several years. And then there's a lot of people that use Latine now in terms of, in exchange for Latinx.
So let me make sure I understand, because I want to make sure I can follow this conversation. Are you saying that in your own personal space, you use Latino?
Because when I use it to identify myself, yeah.
Yeah. And when you are, let's say that we are in a group somewhere, then you would refer to, instead of saying Latinos, right, you would say Latinx.
Yes.
Okay. And is that something that you've learned because of this whole movement about Latinx, or what?
Yeah, I learned it again in undergrad when I was like taking like queer studies, queer theory, and specifically like the intersections of queer theory and the Latino Chicano movement in the U.S.
But isn't there? Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about. Is Latinx, to your understanding, a gender identity movement? Let me finish.
Oh.
Okay. Or is it about removing the perspective of the patriarchal kind of approach that Spanish takes, right? Because, for instance, if there is a professor in the room and there's all females, you refer to them as professoras, right? But then there could be 40 females in the room and one male walk in, and you automatically have to switch to the masculine, right? What is your understanding of where it lies?
I don't think it has to be either or. I feel like it's doing both for the very same reason that like we need gender neutral language to be inclusive of all genders. So it's about fighting the patriarchy, it's about fighting heteronormativity. And so it's both, really, in my understanding.
Okay. And what about what is your knowledge about the Chicana movement?
I can't speak a lot to that. I don't really identify as Chicano or Chicana, but from my knowledge, and again, I don't really know a lot of it, but based on what I know, it's about people, specifically Mexican American people, who needed to carve out their own identity because they were not Mexican enough to be considered Mexican by the Mexicans, or American enough to be considered American by the white Americans. And so it was just kind of like this in between where people, I think specifically in California, and really like carved out this identity of being Chicana, Chicano, and which used to be a derogatory term used by people referring to them because of these like kind of like in between experience that they were having. And so people embraced Chicano, Chicana. And it's probably not just in California. Again, I'm not really sure where it kind of originated. I just know that it was in the U.S. And I think that California had a big movement around the Chicano.
Yeah,
Chicano
I think
movement.
it was in the 60s or something, if I'm not mistaken. The Chicano movement began, I think, around 67. But I never really studied. I do know that my friend Pat in Albuquerque, she identifies as a Chicano now, or Chicana. At least that's what she says now. You know, that's on Monday, but on Tuesday she might say Mexican.
Yeah,
but she was clear that she was Chicana, and so
Chicana first.
Yeah, so I have to respect what her identity is at that particular time, in that particular moment, on that particular day. But okay. So what else you want to talk about on this topic?
Well, I mean, since we're just talking about like this, how we just like, I think that your friend is doing what I was also kind of alluded to earlier, that I use Latino in some contexts, but not all. And I use Mexican in some other situations and not all. And then I use like Latinx in others, and I use Oaxacan in others, and indigenous in others. Like, it's just always like this label that we use for ourselves always changes. So I don't know. That's really interesting to me. And I'm wondering, like, how does that show up for you? Does it show up in any ways in your experience?
Like, because I don't use either word.
You don't say Mexican here and there?
Nah. No. I just say, whatever. What do you want to be called?
No. I mean, like, for yourself.
I'm not either.
I know you're not.
I'm black.
No, I know, but is that what you use?
Black?
Yeah.
Black. I'm blackity black. Okay, black.
Nice.
Black. Okay. Now, I had the privilege of going to Africa. Beautiful people, and at least in the two countries that I visited, which was Senegal and the Gambia. Beautiful places, beautiful people, great energy. But I do not identify as African American, mainly because I think it is a term that folks try to give us to, to placate to the fact that they just didn't want to deal with all the other bullshit that they didn't want to deal with how we got here in the first place. Now, are my origins from Africa? Absolutely, right? And I am one of those individuals. Everyone's origins from Africa, because Africa is the land of all civilization.
Right.
And I'm a individual who subscribe to the fact that Black folks kind of built this country, United States, to where it is, and there are other individuals of people of color who has enhanced it or have enhanced it and continue to enhance it. But yeah, I identify as Black because I think there is strength in that. I think there is a sense of that is not a color, right? Because Black technically is not a color, but it is the essence of who you are, the essence of the concept of anything that you see. And so you would see that before you see white, you would see that before you see green, because it is what it is. And here's the beauty that I think that Black has, right? Is that individuals who can't see only see darkness, but they are still able to thrive and be a part of the society and be beautiful individuals and see beauty in life. And I think the color Black, well, technically it's not a color, but the concept of Black just means all encompassing. So
wow,
that is
beautiful.
my perspective on it.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for
yes.
sharing. That's really good.
So I'm blackity black, black. I'm Black on Monday. I'm Black on Tuesday. I'm Black on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah.
Period.
Good.
Okay. Any other questions for me?
I was just curious, as we were on that interchangeably, and like, again, the census tract, Black and African American is the same one. So
yeah, and
I was wondering.
I mean, it's also the same thing. A lot of people use it interchangeably, just like a lot of people use the concept of Spanish, Hispanic interchangeably, right?
Yeah.
And I do think I am learning or trying to be more open. Well, let me say it this way. I've always thought I was very open of accepting, learning new things about other folks' cultures, beliefs. I have affinity to listen and go to Latin, Latino, Spanish, Hispanic, whatever you want to call it, because they say it all in this area. They call it all the same. But I have an affinity of the music. I have an affinity of just the food. And, my son is half Puerto Rican, so I want him to embrace that side of him as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I've always been that way for me personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me some Latin music.
Love it.
First of all, I'll probably outdance most of y'all anyway. that are indigenous to Oaxaca. I come down there and see that's what Africa do to you, baby. The African soil will have you know any move at any time of the day. Period.
Dance off right now.
Right now.
Hey, we're at the bar. Dance off.
Okay. So wait, did we cover everything we said we was gonna cover?
I think so. I don't know. Is there anything else? Any other questions?
No, but you were kind of nervous and concerned. How do you feel?
I mean, I feel good. I think that after a little easing into the conversation, it was good. I'd still feel a little like intimidated by just having this camera in front of me, but other than that, it's great.
Okay. Because you also, because of, just for full disclaimer, because I do like to be real. Full disclaimer, you did have some concerns about, was I going to be respectful about the conversation, or be like, and throwing darts at you? What do you think?
I think that
what's your assessment?
I feel like you were very respectful in this moment.
I'm always respectful.
You asked for my opinion, and I just shared it. I think you're very respectful right now.
In this moment, in this time, in this space.
About this conversation, yeah. But it was honestly like I really enjoyed this conversation because I feel like we were able to get to, a shared understanding about the different perspectives and stuff. And you pulled up that article that had that made us get to that resolution. But it's still even beyond that. Like, I think that this conversation was really interesting, and I love talking about this. I really do. Any like identity conversation is interesting to me, and learning more about also like what label and why you use it, because labels are I think they do some good, but they also can be harmful for many reasons, like some labels. And so it's just like, I think like these things that we choose to use for ourselves are very interesting to dissect.
Well, and I also think that there is a desire, a thirst here. And let me just say, I haven't did any research, so I can't tell you what other countries, how they are. But I think there's a desire and a thirst of acceptability and wanting to belong here in America, right? And I think part of that is because we don't really truly have an identity as a country, right? We have folks who think they know what their identity is, hence DeSantis and everyone else who think they can throw away all the books. They got to deal with anything that's not white. But, people struggle with that. And I think people struggle with that because we don't have enough of these intimate conversations where you truly can have a difference of opinion, a difference in belief, a difference in perspective, but you can talk about it. You can learn about it. You can understand why individuals feel a certain way, right? As human beings, I do think we need to be empathetic to other folks. And so it's that concept of empathy that I think a lot of people lack in the day-to-day interactions with each other. But, I know I could be an asshole, but I'm very empathetic about, I think, people in general. And I try to be thoughtful in my interactions with them. And it may not come off that way immediately. It may take me some time to get there. And sometimes it's too late because I already turned someone off, right? And that's part of the growth. That's part of the learning. That's part of the experience. And I'm just here to ride the waves of life until I'm no longer here, baby.
Ride them into the sunset.
When I'm no longer here, I can't do this. So I need to do it now before it's too late.
But I feel like, I think that's really important. Like the growth piece, like just wanting to reflect on what you're hearing. And I feel like having a conversation like this, whether I'm uncomfortable or you're uncomfortable, or, like looking at the camera's uncomfortable, whatever it is, like I think that people are open to, or it opens the possibilities for others to listen and learn and be like, open their curiosity to be like, oh, I want to like learn more about this, or, they touched on this or whatever. So I appreciate being invited to this cafe to talk about my experience and my perspective on these identities.
That'll be $5.
I should get some royalties from here.
But
Yeah.
These are little things, but it's life. Whatever.
Yeah.
And anyhow, so that is the episode. That is episode. Don't know the number, but I will put it up right there when I edit it. But it is called I Ain't Spanish. I appreciated the conversation. I want to thank my guest, Humberto.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to say anything to the people before you depart?
No, but thanks for listening. Hopefully you learned something, or there's something that challenged your thinking, and maybe you want to challenge mine.
You talking about me?
Appreciate it. No, the audience. You said anything I want to say to the people.
Because I was like, nah, bro, I'm good. you ain't.
But
I'm
no,
gonna
this
edit
was fun.
that out.
Thank you.
Bye. Edit that. All right. So until next time, here at Peeps Creek, we always have that conversation. And until next time, make sure that you continue to drink, listen, and converse. Peace.